Urban myths and legends have existed for many years. Some are stories to teach us lessons and perhaps scare children a little bit, while others are shrouded in inklings of truth, whether it's cryptids such as Bigfoot or the Lochness Monster, or superstitions like Friday the 13th, all the way to more modern celebrity rumours such as Marilyn Manson having his bottom rib cages removed, for reasons we'll explore in this video. So without further ado, let's dive into the very top of the urban myths and legends iceberg. Area 51. The first entry, we've all heard of it. It's a military installation in the middle of the Nevada deserts that tests stealth military aircraft like the U-2. However, the government only acknowledged its existence in 2013, and for that reason, it's had a lot of theories in the past that there is perhaps alien aircraft testing that goes on there. In 1947, we have the Roswell incident where a supposed aircraft crash landed in the US and was taken to Area 51. That's sort of where the rumours started about Area 51. More modern day, we have Bob Lazar, a figure who claimed he used to work at Area 51 and his job was to backwards engineer certain aircraft there. In 2019, we had the They Can't Stop All of Us meme/craze, where a bunch of people created an event online where they said they were going to storm Area 51, with the idea that if everyone gathers on a particular date, then they could all charge at the same time and no one would be able to stop them getting into the base. Now, of course, it was a meme and loads of people actually turned out on the day, but they never managed to storm the base. Being a super secret government facility, a bunch of teenagers creating an online event, that was never going to happen. Now, of course, the government claimed that it's just a secret facility where they develop stealth aircraft and other secret military technology. That's why it needs to be kept secret. But perhaps they are hiding some aliens in there and perhaps backwards engineering crafts. 2016 clown sightings. Now, in 2016, around Halloween time, I do believe, across the US, Australia, and the UK, there was a multitude of clown sightings where people just dressed as clowns simply stood out on the street looking creepy, trying to scare people. This all started in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where a viral video went around of a clown just standing, looking really creepy under a bridge. This turned out to be promotional film for a film called Gags the Clown. But within weeks, we saw other videos going viral online of other clowns dressed up all over America, just standing in creepy spots, trying to scare people. The trend basically got so crazy that schools and police in different areas across the states had to issue reports warning people that there may potentially be clowns being aggressive and even trying to cause violence to people. Many of these reports were hoaxes or exaggerated, but there were a few instances of violence where people would dress up as clowns and actually decide to attack people on the street. It led to dozens of arrests all over the US. And then the trend spread by October around Halloween time across the UK and Australia, where people would replicate the same thing. They would dress up as a clown, go out and just stand in weird spots, trying to scare people. I actually remember this, and there was a moral panic that in 2016 around Halloween time that you should be really careful because people were just going to dress up as clowns and go out and attack you in the middle of the street. After Halloween of that year, the trend really died down and there wasn't actually that many incidents of clown violence as people kind of thought there would be. There was some, like I said earlier, there was some arrests, but the trend did just die off and it was simply just promotional material for a film that went a bit viral and went crazy. The ankle slicing car thief, or the man under your car. Legend says there's certain criminals that hide under your car waiting for you to come along, unlock it, and they will slice your Achilles tendon, making you collapse to the ground, and then that's their perfect opportunity to either kidnap you or steal your car. As the story goes, the victims, often women, in a dark parking lot at night, will approach their car, unlock it, and a man will slash at their Achilles tendon, and then he will abduct her in her own car. The moral of the story, I guess, being always check under your car if you're approaching it at night in a dark parking lot. Now, the legend goes back to hearsay in the 1950s being spread around, but it had a real resurgence in the 90s when long text threads were popular. People would share this story on a long text thread that it happened to a friend of a friend, copy it, send it around, so it would spread, warning women to check under their cars. While you can see why this story might cause panic and you might feel the need to share it if you heard that it happened to a friend of a friend, there's no actual real report of anything like this ever happening. Bigfoot. Everyone's favourite cryptid Bigfoot, or the Sasquatch, said to inhabit areas of remote forest in North America. He's a tall, muscular figure covered in dark hair. The craze really took off in 1958 when a Californian logging crew found huge footprints in the remote forests of Northern California. They took photos and reported them to a newspaper, and the story went nationwide with the headline Bigfoot. The story was also linked to, at the time, some Native American stories of the Sasquatch, which was a big furry creature that was said to be the protector of the forests. The most iconic bit of Sasquatch footage that we have is the Patterson-Gimlin film. I'm sure you've seen it before, but it was actually captured in Bluff Creek, which is the area in Northern California where the first reports of seeing Bigfoot were ever reported. Now make sure you subscribe, because I actually have a video coming up soon of the ultimate sort of Bigfoot evidence video where I look over every piece of evidence ever captured of Bigfoot. So make sure you subscribe for that one. Bloody Mary or Candyman. Now, you probably remember this. If you're a similar age to me, I remember the girls doing it at school. You'd look in the mirror and you say Bloody Mary or Candyman 4 times, and a figure of either Bloody Mary or Candyman would appear behind you. It was said that she would appear covered in blood, sometimes even carrying a baby that was also covered in blood. Sometimes she would scratch you or even pull you into the mirror. I know in England we link Bloody Mary to figures like Mary I, who was a queen, and she was famous or infamous for burning Protestants. Also a witch named Mary Worth. Perhaps you could be summoning a queen that burnt Protestants or a witch. I found a guy online, Alan Dundes, a classic folklorist, that put this down to a puberty or menstruation anxiety ritual that girls would do in bathrooms to test their bottle and their anxiety with each other. I believe Candyman was probably more common in America, and you do the same thing. You say the name in the mirror and a Candyman, this figure, would appear, and the legend actually says that he would kill you with a swarm of bees. So yeah, pretty more terrifying than Bloody Mary, I would say. Of course, with this one, there's never actually been any real evidence that this works. New Coke was intentional. This theory claims that in 1985, the Coca-Cola company released a new flavor of Coca-Cola because Pepsi was beating them in all the blind taste tests.
Attention Pepsi drinkers, introducing the new taste of Coca-Cola, the best Coca-Cola ever.
However, there was so much backlash, they reverted back to the old Coke and they named it Classic Coca-Cola. This switch back to Classic Coca-Cola made sales rocket up, and they actually started to overtake Pepsi once again. So the story goes that the Coca-Cola company were playing 4D chess all along. They switched back to the old Classic Coca-Cola because they knew that the nostalgic look would cause sales to skyrocket. Coca-Cola executives say that they are not that smart, and they rebranded to New Coke to change the recipe slightly to try and beat Pepsi, but obviously the backlash meant that they had to revert back to the classic Coca-Cola flavor. The New Coke marketing campaign is seen as one of the biggest fails ever, but it ended up as being a happy accident because who doesn't love a classic full-fat Coca-Cola? Slenderman. The tall, faceless, suit-wearing humanoid that stalks people in the forests, Slenderman. In most versions of the story, he stalks children or vulnerable people and will appear in the backgrounds of photographs or at the edges of your vision, causing you to go absolutely insane. Unlike many other cryptids, Slenderman has an actual birth date. On the 10th of June 2009, on the Something Awful forum, Eric Kundenson, with the alias Victor Surge, created a Photoshop contest where he would design images of children with this creepy Slenderman figure lurking in the background. Along with these pictures, he wrote creepypastas about stories of children going missing in the forest. People love Slenderman so much that people took on their own projects, whether it was writing stories or creating their own fake photoshopped photos. And ultimately, the game. I remember playing the game. Sure, again, if you're my age, a lot of people would have played the Slenderman game that came out maybe around 2012, where you walk around the woods collecting notes, I believe, and the Slenderman would stalk you. Now, in 2014, we do have a real Slenderman case, but it's not what you think. Two 12-year-old girls in Wisconsin ended up luring one of their friends into the woods and stabbing her. Once the two girls were arrested, they later told police that they did it to appease the Slenderman so that he would not harm their families. This pushed this niche internet horror character into the mainstream news and was one of the first real warnings about how online stories can affect children's mental health and influence real world violence. Paul is dead. Paul is Dead refers to the 1966 rumour that Paul McCartney of the Beatles died in a car crash and was replaced by a lookalike. The stand-ins have usually been called William Campbell or Billy Shears, and people say that the Beatles held a lookalike contest to find a lookalike for Paul after he crashed his Mini Cooper and died. Paul used to drive a very distinctive Mini Cooper at the time, and there was pictures of it wrecked and it was crashed, but supposedly there was someone else driving at the time. Many fans would mishear reports and forget about the part that someone else was driving and assumed that Paul was now indeed dead because the wreck was so bad. Some people even say John Lennon was trying to tell people through the music and the artwork of the Beatles. We see on the Abbey Road album cover, Paul was barefoot and he was out of sync with his steps with the others. He also had a cigarette in his right hand when he was left-handed. And the other Beatles here, John is dressed as a priest in all white, Ringo is dressed as an undertaker, and George in all denim is dressed as a gravedigger. It's also said that the Sgt. Pepper album cover was supposedly a funeral procession for Paul. And the name Billy Shears is announced at the start of the song with a help from my friend. And it's said that this Billy Shears character is the replacement for Paul. Also in the song Strawberry Fields Forever, if you listen to it backwards, right at the end of the song, so if you're going backwards, I guess right at the start of the song, you hear the words said by John, "I buried Paul." Many viewing this as a obvious confession that Paul has passed away. Of course, this was debunked, and there's actually a image of Paul McCartney on the Life magazine with the literal headline, "Paul is still with us." It was an inside joke within the Beatles for many years. John Lennon would actually play up on the conspiracy theory and write lyrics to make fans, believe the theory even further. Perhaps that's the story with the album covers as well. They put subtle hints in there to make people believe the theory. It's a textbook example of confirmation bias, where if you see small patterns in something that you want to believe in, then you simply will and you won't ask any more questions, even if there's literal picture proof of the person that you think is dead. Satanic Backmasking. As mentioned in the previous entry here, if you play Strawberry Fields Forever backwards, you can hear Paul is Dead. Well, it's said that the music of the same era, a lot of rock and roll in the 60s and 70s, if you play it backwards, then you can hear demonic rhetoric that was there to poison the youth of the era. A lot of Christian evangelists would actually make these claims at the time. One of the most famous examples is Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, where if you play it backwards, it supposedly sounds like, "Here's to my sweet Satan." It's also said that Hotel California by the Eagles has satanic worship, with one of the lines backwards being, "Yes, Satan has organized his own religion." And in the 90s, there was actually a backmasking trial involving Judas Priest for the song Better by You, Better Than Me. The band was accused of putting the words "do it" backwards over and over again in this song to essentially drive fans to the point of suicide. It's a theory known as pareidolia, where if you have in your head that you want to hear a certain thing, then you will. So there's absolutely no proof that bands were doing this. However, it is known that ELO and Soundgarden did actually do some backmasking in some of their tracks as a parody to this. But yeah, nothing as sinister as the Eagles or Led Zeppelin putting satanic messages in their songs. Black-eyed children. The story goes that pale children with completely blacked out eyes are often hanging around parking lots or the side of the road asking people for lifts or hitchhiking. People often feel like they should give these hitchhikers a lift, but upon closer inspection, you notice the pale skin and the black eyes. People start to become unnerved. And as per the story, if you let these children in your car, it often results in a fatal car wreck. A key detail of the story is that the black-eyed children are like vampires. They have to be invited in. So this is why they hitchhike or hang around in parking lots, because they need you to give them permission to enter your vehicle. The story comes from the 1990s, where journalist Brian Bethel printed the story claiming that this exact scenario happened to him. He was driving along where he saw two children hitchhiking. He pulled over to let them in and saw they had completely blacked out eyes. This is when he was spooked and he decided to speed away. The story has spread in the internet era through creepypastas online, and I think there is actually a moral to this story. And the moral being that your kindness can be exploited. Melon Heads. Melon Heads are a small humanoid creature with abnormally large bulbous heads. They're said to live in remote woodland or abandoned buildings. They're about 3 foot tall and they stalk and attack people. The stories differ from different localities, and the typical story is that People break down on the side of a road next to abandoned buildings or empty woodland, and these melon head creatures will come out and attack them with their sharp teeth. In Ohio, the story comes from a Wisnut Road in the Chardon Township. And the story goes a crazy doctor had a bunch of orphans and he injected their heads with a certain fluid to make their heads swell like melons. The aftermath says that these orphans eventually attacked and killed the doctor, and they're now roaming free in the area around Wisner Road. As I said, the story is also common in Connecticut and Michigan, and the stories slightly differ to locality. Perhaps there's a mental asylum nearby, certain roads in Michigan. The story will evolve around that mental asylum, but the story is still the same. Some orphans got something injected into their head, their limbs are deformed, they've turned crazy, and now they're roaming the area looking for people that have broken down to attack and ultimately kill. Again, in the internet age, creepypastas have made melon heads more of a famed figure in the cryptid world. Chupacabra. El Chupacabra, or the goat sucker, is a Latin American cryptid known for sucking the blood out of goats, but otherwise leaving the rest of the corpse completely intact. The Chupacabra wave took off in 1995 in Puerto Rico, where farmers would find their goats had small puncture wounds in their neck and the blood was completely drained, but otherwise the goat was completely unharmed. The story would eventually spread around Puerto Rico, many people reporting the same thing, and then down through Latin America as south as Chile, and even up as far as Maine, north through the United States. The Chupacabra is reported to be an alien-like reptile, 4 to 5 feet tall, with a grey-greenish skin, large oval eyes, and a quill running down its spine. It has small arms and hops around like a kangaroo, and it's also been reported to smell like sulfur. The typical folklore and conspiracy angles report the Chupacabra as a failed government experiment that escaped a lab in Puerto Rico. Some people see it as a demonic creature that is punishing communities when livestock is mistreated, and some people simply say it's an alien-like creature who just enjoys sucking the blood out of goats' necks. Biologists and wildlife experts say that many Chupacabra cases are similar to attacks that could have been done by coyotes or wild dogs. As with this report, it's very interesting how it picks up in one place and it literally spread all around, from south to Chile, up to north in Maine. I simply think it's people wanting to be part of the conversation as it spreads. Perhaps they heard a neighbor mention it and they want to be part of that conversation too. And it really is a great lesson in how rumors and these folklore conspiracies can spread. Doveland, Wisconsin. Doveland, Wisconsin is a town that supposedly just completely disappeared from the map in the 1990s. The town supposedly vanished along with all historical records and even record of it being on the map. The only evidence that we actually have of Dovetown is people claiming that they once visited there, and some people even say they have souvenirs from the town, magnets, mugs, and t-shirts. It was supposedly a small town between Stevens Point and Pittsville in Wisconsin, but that's really all we know. There's never been any confirmed coordinates or anything like that. Some people, as part of the conspiracy, say perhaps the town was swallowed up by a sinkhole, or even that the town was a secret government experiment and something went wrong in that experiment and the government had to get rid of all evidence that the town ever existed. This is a really strange modern urban legend. However, it could be related to something we have coming up in a little while, the Mandela effect, where people believe something really happened when really it could just be a false memory. The Devil's Footprints. One of our oldest entries in this episode, we have a Devil's Footprints from 1855 in Devon, England. After heavy snowfall in Devon, local residents woke up to find goat-like footprints in the snow going on for many miles. Reports vary from between 40 and 100 miles, and one of the weirdest things about these footprints is they walk in a perfectly straight line, crossing any obstacles like frozen lakes, even over roofs and high walls. Hundreds of people witnessed these footprints, and it was reported that the devil himself walked across Devon that night. It's obviously been theorized that these could have just been any old animal's footprints, perhaps a hopping animal that could hop up high walls and get onto roofs. Some have even suggested an escaped kangaroo from the area created these footprints. Either way, it exists as like a Victorian style creepypasta. It's like the Victorians were spreading some story in the local area to scare people from sinning. Well, to hell. Legend has it that in Siberia, the Russians were digging a super deep hole to try and get to the core of the earth. As they were digging around 9 miles down, they broke through to hell. They supposedly dug through to a fiery cavern that measured at around 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, where they could hear the tormented screams of damned souls. The story first spread through my country, England, in 1989, where a Christian TV network supposedly played these recordings that recorded from the hole. Some reports even said that giant bat-like demons came out of the hole and flew up into the sky, creating trails of fire behind them. A Norwegian schoolteacher, Ainge Randland, heard this on the Christian site, and as a joke, he decided to write back saying that he actually had been visited by a demon. As he lives nearby, he thinks the demon must have come from the hole. And of course, the Christian network reported this story as being completely true. It turns out that the audio recordings were taken from a 1972 horror film, Barren Blood, and they were edited slightly to give people some kind of psychological scare. Now, this legend actually has some truth to it, as in the Soviets were digging a big hole, not in Siberia, in Finland. It was known as the Kola Super Deep Borehole, or SG3. In 1980, but of course they didn't find hell. They found a hole filled with hydrogen gas, water, and fossils, not a demon or a screaming damned soul in sight. Polybius. Polybius is the ultimate cursed arcade game. The story goes that in Portland, Oregon in 1981, this mysterious black cabinet appeared in arcades across the country. The game was said to be so addictive that it would fry players' brains. Kids lined up for hours and they were mesmerized by the graphics and the colors, only to suffer amnesia, nightmares, hallucinations, and even disappearing completely. The legend says that the Polybius cabinets always appeared unannounced. They would only ever be there for 1 to 2 weeks, and they would be serviced by men in black suits. These men in black would come and haul the machines away before taking all of the players' data. Retellings of the gameplay vary widely, from maze exploration games to shooter games to even abstract vector shapes, but it always features flashing lights and strange psychoactive elements. Some people suggest that the game was part of the CIA's MK Ultra program, where they would try and control people's minds through subliminal messaging. Unfortunately, none of these game consoles have ever been recovered, and there's no proof that they ever existed. And it's also not featured anywhere in the declassified MK Ultra paperwork that was declassified in our Freedom of Information Act. The legend exploded online in the CoinOp forum in the year 2000, and it's also said to be an inspiration for the films and books Ready Player One. Hanako-san. Hanako-san comes from Japan and is an urban schoolyard legend, very similar to Candyman and Bloody Mary. If you go to the door of the third stall on the third floor, girls' bathroom in a school, and you say the words Hanako-san, which means, "Are you there?" then you can expect a reply saying Hayamasu, which means "I am here," followed by a ghostly hand dragging you under the stall and into the toilet all the way into hell. Just like Candyman and Bloody Mary, it's seen as a rite of passage for girls going through puberty. It's said to have appeared after World War II, around the 1950s. The story goes that a girl was in the third cubicle in the third floor bathroom when they were bombed, and that was where the bombs hit and she passed away. It supposedly took off in the 90s in Japan, so if you're a schoolgirl in Japan and you went to school in the 90s, it's likely that you remember this. And it's also likely that I am absolutely butchering the pronunciation of any Japanese words I've tried to say. Killer in the Backseat. Killer in the Backseat is very similar to the guy that hides under your car and slashes your Achilles heel. Essentially, an escaped convict or a dangerous criminal lurks in the backseat of people's cars, and as they're driving along, someone behind them will flash their lights, warning that there's someone perhaps in the back of their car. The person being flashed is confused to what's going on, so they pull over to the side, and as they pull over, the person behind them will shout out, "Check your back seat." And as they turn around, there is someone lurking, ready to strike them on the back seat. Again, the story evolves from these chain letters or like chain emails that came out from the 80s and 90s. I guess it's a warning, again, aimed at women to check their back seats before they take off and start driving. But again, similar to the Achilles slashing guy, this is so strange to me. He was just going to be lurking in the backseat of your car ready to attack. Again, I tried to find some cases. There's nothing really that exists. I found a case from 1964 where some escaped prisoner was hiding in a police car and he stole the policeman's gun and shot him in the back of the head. But other than that, I think this is very unlikely. I don't think you need to check under your cars in the car park or parking lot, and I don't think you need to check your back seat before you take off and drive on your own at night. Tupac is alive. Tupac is alive is a great conspiracy theory. I'm sure most people are aware of it. Rapper Tupac Shakur was supposedly he faked his own death in 1996, and he's currently hiding in, perhaps hinted at being, Cuba. Fans point to clues in his post-death musical releases and also many pictures of worldwide sightings being seen as proof that he is indeed still alive. On September the 7th, 1996, Tupac was shot in a drive-by shooting after a Mike Tyson fight. He died 6 days later from internal bleeding, and this is exactly when the conspiracy starts. So around 2 months after his death, Tupac released the album The Don Killuminati, The 7-Day Theory, released under his alter ego name Machiavelli. The cover art shows him being crucified, and people draw comparisons from Jesus, who was resurrected just 3 days after death. And the theory says the whole thing was planned. He nods to this in the album. He got a body double in to fake his own death, and he had accomplices at the scene, Suge Knight being one of them. His motive to fake death was to get away from his lifestyle of fame and also the rap beef between the East and West at the time. There's even a lyric on the album, on the song Better Days. Tupac says, "Expect me like you expect Jesus to come back." Also listed as an executive producer on the album is someone called Simon, who was a biblical witness to the resurrection of Jesus. People say autopsy photos show discrepancies between true pictures of Tupac, and also many of the sightings, pictures of him being seen in Cuba, New York, Sweden, Somalia, and even Suge Knight himself said in an interview when asked, "Is Tupac still alive?" He said, "I guess you never know with Pac." Just like the Paul McCartney theory, this is really kept alive by fans who have that belief that they really want him to be alive and they hold on to anything. The confirmation bias thing. I think it's true here as well. Halloween candy being poisoned or with razor blades. Warnings that sadistic strangers would put razor blades or even poison in Halloween chocolate and then give it out to children has been a rumor for many years, and it almost comes around every Halloween. Again, the theory spread through chain letters back in the day, then through emails, and probably through chain text threads now, where parents warn each other of people in the neighborhood putting razor blades in apples or chocolates and candies, and maybe even poisoning them with poison and drugs to affect their children that are going out trick-or-treating this Halloween. I guess the moral of the story here would be never trust getting anything from strangers. But like I said, it's almost entirely a myth. I said almost entirely a myth. That's because in 1974 in Texas, a man named Ronald O'Brien laced pixie sticks with cyanide. He gave these pixie sticks to some of his friends' kids in the neighborhood and his own kids. Other than this case, there is no other proven cases of strangers tampering with Halloween candies. So even though it comes around every year, parents and children alike can enjoy their Halloween candies as they wish. You don't need to worry about someone tampering it with drugs, poison, or razor blades. Spider bites with eggs in the skin. Now, this is exactly what it says on the tin. I think I've heard this one before. People say if you get bitten by certain spiders when you're traveling abroad, that they actually burrow their eggs into your skin. This results in the eggs incubating and hatching, and either spiders spilling out everywhere or burrowing even further in your skin and spiders eventually living inside of you. Again, it's spread back in the day through chain emails where people tell a story of someone that they know that was infected by a spider bite. She noticed a swelling and a large lump that she ignored, and the ending result was these spiders burrowing even further into her skin. Now, obviously, scientifically and biologically, this is completely impossible. Spiders don't burrow their eggs into your skin. even if they did try and do that, the body temperature is so high, the immune response and your antibodies would destroy the spider eggs instantly. That's not to say that some spider bites are not dangerous. Obviously, some spider bites can be very dangerous, but not because they are burrowing eggs into your skin. The hook. The hook comes from a early 1950s folklore where supposedly couples would pull up down Lover's Lane looking to get freaky in their cars. And as they begin to get freaky, all of a sudden, a man with a hook clutches onto the door. Upon speeding away and getting out to inspect what had happened, people reported seeing the hook dangling from their car door handles. A real tale in morality, teaching the youth of the 50s and the 60s not to engage in premarital sex. The story was first printed in the US in the 1950s, but exploded in the 60s in an Agony Aunt-style column named Dear Abby. The myth was probably inspired a little bit by Captain Hook, perhaps from Peter Pan. Other than that, there is no real cases, of course, as a man with a hook coming out to scare lovers getting a little bit frisky. Bunnyman. Bunnyman is the updated version of the last entry here. We have a man in a bunny suit stalking victims with an axe who would pull off the road in a nice, quiet, secluded location to, again, get a little bit freaky. It said he would scream in front of cars with his axe and chop down trees in front of them, and in darker versions, even skinning people alive. Now, unlike the pure fiction of some of these other entries, the Bunnyman actually comes from a real story from Fairfax County in the 1970s. On October the 19th, Air Force cadet Robert Bennett and his fiancée parked up on Guinea Road when a man in a bunny suit hurled a hatchet through their window and shouted private property. Just 10 days later, a bunch of teenagers pulled off on the same stretch of road. They reported to police that they were pulling off to have a nap. Now, how true that actually is, who knows? But anyway, a man in a bunny costume would appear with a hatchet and he would stare and scream at the teenagers for trespassing. These are confirmed police reports, and the hatchet was, of course, recovered from the couple who got it thrown through their window, but the identity of the Bunnyman was never discovered. Now, this story snowballed across the 1970s across the whole of the United States. However, there were no more confirmed police reports or cases of the Bunnyman, and in extreme versions of the story I mentioned, he would skin his victims alive, but there is definitely no evidence that this ever happened. Licked hand, or humans can lick too. Now, this one's just straight up so odd. I'm going to tell you the story. I've not heard of this one, but apparently it's really common and it's quite a legendary tale. The story goes that someone is home alone and they have a dog or a cat, and their hand is hanging off their bed and they can feel their cat or their dog licking their hand. Now, in the background in their bathroom, they can hear a dripping sound, which they ignore, and then they feel the hand being licked again by their pet. The person sleeping by themselves finds the licks reassuring, so that's why they decide to ignore the dripping sound coming from the bathroom. It's not until they wake up in the morning and they go into the bathroom they discover that the dripping sound was from their pet, who has been gutted and strung up in the bathroom, and the dripping is coming from the blood coming from the corpse of their own pet. There is a blood-soaked message written on the wall or the mirror that says humans can lick too. Now, this is just some straight up weird, creepy story that again spread around on email chains in the 90s. This received global recognition, and it was one of the first email chains to use the forward this email to all of your contacts or the killer will get you too. And I think this is so funny because I'm not like superstitious, or I would never believe in anything like this. I don't think many people would, but it seemed like in the 90s, like people actually would share these things. Were they sharing them because they thought the killer was going to get them too? Or were they sharing them because they thought it was a creepy story and they wanted to share that with their friends? But either way, this story is disturbing, to say the least. Skinwalkers. Skinwalkers are known to be malevolent Navajo witches. Apparently they're not cryptids, they're Navajo witches. Think of them as shapeshifters that spend most of their time shapeshifting to be a coyote or a wolf, but they can also shapeshift and imitate your family members. Navajo folklore says that they are most dangerous around Navajo reservations. So if you live near one, be careful of your family members. Perhaps they're being impersonated by a skinwalker. They'll supposedly impersonate your family members and gain your trust before killing you and eating you. Mothman. Mothman is a large winged humanoid type cryptid. It was first seen in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1966 and is often described as having red, glowing eyes. It's said to stand 7 foot tall and have a 10-foot wingspan, and it can fly over speeds of 100 miles an hour. The first report comes from November the 15th, 1966, by Roger and Linda Scarberry. They claim that Mothman chased down their car on Route 62. After this story was out, throughout 1967, there was a wave of reports. People reported seeing the creature near bridges, farmers reported the creature, again, lovers looking for secluded spots would report the creature. And many people also reported their dogs going missing because Mothman would swoop from the skies and pick up their dogs and take them away. As mentioned, December the 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 46 people. Sightings seemed to stop around this point. People claiming that Mothman was there just to bring doom and death. It took him a year to do so, but upon doing so, the sightings ended. Wildlife experts propose the sandhill crane as a possible wildlife explanation as to what people are seeing. Meanwhile, to this day in Point Pleasant, they have a Mothman festival that attracts thousands of visitors every single year. The town actually thrives on the cryptid tourism with a 12-foot statue of Mothman and its own museum. Flatwoods Monster. On September the 12th in 1952 in Flatwoods, West Virginia, two brothers, Edward and Fred May, plus their friend Tommy Hoyer, saw an object crash land on a nearby farm. They went to fetch their mum and a couple of cousins and they headed to the crash site. They reported seeing a pulsating red light and then a 10-foot tall monster. It was hissing with piercing red glowing eyes and a head shaped like the ace of spades. It had claw-like hands and a skirt-like body that was spraying some sort of mist before it then went and floated away. As the witnesses were left in the alien's mist, they all suffered sore eyes, some of them were choking and vomiting, very much like a mustard gas kind of reaction. Now, there was never any physical evidence found, but as the story goes, it's still famous in the area today. Baltic Sea Anomaly. The Baltic Sea Anomaly refers to a 60-meter wide, should we call it a formation, discovered in the Baltic Sea, specifically in the Gulf of Bothnia. You can see it here. Many people say perhaps it's a UFO crash site or lost Nazi tech. It kind of looks like the Millennium Falcon, so maybe Han Solo crash landed on Earth and landed in the sea. People say that it has a 300-meter skid mark trailing behind it, more evidence pointing towards perhaps a crashed craft. And also, when Swedish divers from the Ocean X, Ocean Discovery team got close, their equipment started to fail. All of their radio equipment and things like that started to fail. I think 200 meters out from the craft, the formation, the object, all the radio equipment failed. Stockholm University geologist Volker Bruchert inspected the samples, and they were said to be glacial granite left over in the ocean from a post-ice age process. So it turns out these are just some rocks. But many people at the time believe, and I think probably still believe, that this is some kind of crash craft. Men in Black. We've all seen the film Men in Black, and it turns out there's some folklore about mysterious figures in black suits showing up at UFO crash sites and threatening people to not speak of what they've seen. The report started in the 1950s, and they're always the same. Two men dressed in black suits with sunglasses show up at their house, threatening them never to speak about what they've seen, sometimes even threatening their family. They flash badges, take photos, take perhaps debris, and then leave in shiny black Cadillacs. Some witnesses have even reported telepathic threats hours after the men arrived. The first report of the Men in Black comes from 1947. A man named Harold Dull had a debris from what he said was a donut-shaped UFO land on his boat. He reported it, and a day later, two men in black suits showed up. They threatened him to never speak about what he had seen. He reported this, and the FBI have come out and said, this is complete fiction. This never happened. But of course they would. As I've said, there's many incidences of this happening across the 50s and 60s. The government, of course, deny it, but some people go a step further and say perhaps these Men in Black figures are actually aliens who are shapeshifted into humans and are trying to cover the tracks of maybe crafts that they've left behind. Of course, the 1997 film Men in Black with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones depicts the Men in Black as being good guys, but purists that actually believe in the Men in Black hate this rendition of them. They say they're pure evil and they're never good guys. They're never looking to save the world.
Sorry.
Marilyn Manson rib removal. Now, this is one that I had definitely heard before. I think it's quite well known. The rumor is that Marilyn Manson had his 2 bottom ribs removed from his rib cage so that he could more easily perform sexual acts on himself. Autofellatio, I believe you could call it. The rumor appeared in 1994, where Manson was actually arrested after coming off stage for violating the Adult Entertainment Code, where he paraded around on stage with a fake penis. The real arrest spread into the rumor of the rib removal by tabloids, MTV, and, again, email chains. Manson actually lent into the rumor as it kind of suited his image quite well. The whole body modding, sex, Satanism stuff, it kind of fits that. So yeah, Marilyn Manson lent into it. He did write in his 1998 autobiography, if I really got my ribs removed, I would have been busy sucking my own dick on the Wonder Years instead of chasing Winnie Cooper. I assume Winnie Cooper is his partner. There was actually a 1990 myth that Cher did the exact same thing, but she actually went to a medical professional and got a doctor's letter to prove to the public that she did indeed have a full set of ribs. Satanic Panic. In the mid-1980s across North America, there was a moral panic that heavy metal music and Dungeons & Dragons was the cause of a satanic cult abusing and sacrificing children. Over 12,000 unsubstantiated cases led to trials, causing a cultural hysteria before collapsing in the mid-90s. This kicked off in the 1980s, where a psychiatrist, Lawrence Pazder, used the discredited memory recovery methods to uncover a patient, Michelle Smith's, satanic abuse memories from when she was a child. The case spread through Geraldo Rivera TV specials, evangelical seminars, and a famous book at the time by Mike Warrenk, The Satan Seller. This book, of course, has since been debunked as being complete fiction. Parents feared that people were in a satanic cult that were playing Dungeons & Dragons and listening to heavy metal music, were getting jobs in daycares just so they could abuse their children. One of the most famous cases was the West Memphis 3, where 3 teenagers were convicted of murder on the evidence that they wore black clothes and listened to Metallica. They were later exonerated in 2011 when DNA cleared them of the murders. One of the longest cases, spanning 7 years from 1983 to 1990, was the McMartin preschool case. It was a really long trial, and it accused 7 teachers of having tunnel orgies and sacrificing animals in the preschool. All 7 teachers were acquitted after it was said that all the children that were interviewed by police were coerced into giving answers. During the 80s and 90s, there was over 200 convictions because of Satanic Panic related evidence. Most of these have since been overturned. FBI's Ken Lanning called it a subculture analysis gone wrong. And of course, no evidence of a secret satanic cult behind Dungeons & Dragons and heavy metal music has ever been proven. The Lochness Monster. The Lochness Monster, or Nessie, is one of the most famous cryptids of all time. It's a long-necked creature. We all know what it looks like, a dinosaur-looking thing that's said to inhabit Scotland's Loch Ness. It's said to be like a plesiosaur, which is this, and it's said to be dark, humped body, between 20 and 40 foot long neck. It's swan-like, it's got a small head. There's been over 1,100 reports of people that say they've seen Nessie, the first of which dates back to the 6th century. In 565 AD, Saint Columba said a disciple of his was attacked by a water beast when walking next to the Loch Ness. The saint is said to have repelled the beast with his cross. But the case went worldwide in 1933 when George Spicer said he spotted a prehistoric animal in the loch. These reports sparked a media frenzy, and they were followed up in 1994, just a year later, with the famous surgeon's photo. This photo is absolutely iconic, but it was revealed in 1994 that a toy submarine was used to create the photo. From the 1950s all the way to 2020, multiple organizations have done sonar scans of the body of water, and they've never found any evidence of even a reptile living in Loch Ness. It's believed that there could be giant eels in the loch, and perhaps those are some of the culprits to the Loch Ness sightings. Many others have simply said they could be otters or even elk swimming in the loch. Boogeyman. Everyone knows the Boogeyman, right? Or was it just me? Was that childhood trauma? My nan used to use the Boogeyman on me. It's a folklore figure used by parents and grandparents, in my case, to scare children into good behavior, basically. I was told if I'm bad, if I'm naughty, then the Boogeyman was hiding under my bed and he'll come out at night and take me. Now, when researching this, I feel validated because the story is exactly that. People say that the Boogeyman was used to scare them into good behavior. Different variations include the Boogeyman hiding in closets rather than under beds, or just in the shadows, lurking, ready to snatch children if they are bad. Interestingly, the Boogeyman has no fixed appearance. It's kind of whatever is the worst thing that particular child is being told about can imagine. Different countries have different variations. In Spain and Portugal, they have El Cuco. In the Balkans, they have Babagora. In Africa and Asia, we have Wee Wee Gommel and Zimwi. And in the Americas, we have the Basket Woman, just to name a few different variations of the Boogeyman. Alien autopsy footage. In 1995, a man named Ray Santillini released a 17-minute black and white grainy footage of a supposed alien autopsy. It shows US military surgeons dissecting a grey alien corpse that was supposedly recovered from the 1947 Roswell crash. Santillini claimed that he bought it off a 1940s military man who worked on Area 51. Fox made a special on it and it had over 20 million viewers, and in the UK they made a film, UK Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, and it sold out everywhere. It wasn't until 11 years later, where in 2006, Santillini admitted that he filmed it in a London flat and it was all completely fake. The alien was made of plaster and paper mache, and they used sheep brains, raspberry jam, and chicken innards to make the guts and the gore. He claimed the video was inspired by real footage that he saw in 1992, only a few frames of real footage, and wanted to recreate it. Another quite funny detail is apparently he used a homeless man off the streets who was the cameraman, as he wanted to star as one of the surgeons. Sewer alligators. Now, sewer alligators refers to the completely absurd claim the tourists in Florida would buy baby alligators. They would then bring them back home to New York and decide to flush them down the toilet, causing a huge clan of alligators. I don't know what you call a group of alligators. A huge pack of alligators lurking in the New York sewers. It's said that these alligators have so many rats to eat that they would become gigantic, up to 10 foot in size. And also because they don't get any light down there, they turn albino for some reason. This myth dates back to the 1930s, where there were reports of an alligator coming out the sewers and dragging down a Harlem boy who was shoveling snow. Imagine seeing an alligator in the snow. That alone would, I guess, kind of be terrifying. This story was never verified, and it's highly unlikely that there's alligators in the sewers. I think if you flush an alligator down the sewer, it probably wouldn't survive. And even if it did make it into the sewers, then there's not enough food down there. Yeah, there's rats. There's not enough food to satiate an alligator. The 27 Club. The 27 Club is a statistical curse that is said to kill off certain musicians at the age of 27. It's highlighted by icons like Jimi Hendrix, Brian Jones, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison, all dying at the age of 27. And then it was revived in the modern era with people like Kurt Cobain and Amy Winehouse. Interestingly, the British Medical Journal has done a study on this, and they say that there is no spike in 27-year-olds versus other ages. Young rockers die from the drugs and the lifestyle at loads of ages. It's not a spike for 27-year-olds. For whatever reason, the 27 Club has just captured people's imaginations. Friday the 13th. Everyone knows Friday the 13th. It's a super unlucky day. Whenever one falls, there's certain people that you know that will panic and be like, oh my God, I can't even leave the house today. Something bad is going to happen. Now, interestingly, I found out the origins of Friday the 13th while researching for this video. And it's quite interesting. In a lot of biblical text, Friday and the number 13 comes up when there is drama that is about to happen. In ancient Viking mythology, Loki crashes the god's banquet, and he's the 13th guest to the banquet. And interestingly, Judas in the Christian Bible is the 13th disciple. We also have some bad Fridays in the Bible. It's the day that Eve decides to eat the apple. Cain kills Abel on a Friday. And of course, Jesus is crucified on Good Friday. There are more recent examples that fit the modern anxiety around the number. You have the Apollo 13 disaster, for example, which didn't happen on a Friday, but it still involves the number 13, I guess. And there are some hotel rooms that skip the room number 13. I also found a club called the US 13 Club, and in 1882, on Friday the 13th, they had a 13-course meal, and they all sat under ladders. So these guys just want all the bad luck, basically. Now, statistically, on Friday the 13th, it's not like there are more accidents or more people end up in hospital or anything like. There is no statistics to back up Friday the 13th. And there is a medical term for people that are scared of certain numbers, which I guess Friday the 13th would be. The phobia is called, bear with me here, paraskevacatriophobia, something like that, is the clinical fear of Friday the 13th. Maybe you're a gambler and you would avoid the number 13. I think for a lot of people, this is a superstition that still holds up today. Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil is New Jersey's state cryptid, a winged hoof-like demon hunting in South Jersey. It was said to be born in 1735 when her mother cursed during the birth of her third child. She said, "Let this one be the devil," and mid-birth it transformed into a hooved-like devil creature and flew out of the family chimney. It's said to have been haunting South New Jersey ever since, when in 1909 there was over 1,000 sightings that actually led to schools and workplaces like the factories being shut down. It's said to have a kangaroo-like body, a goat or horse head, bat-like wings, and of course hooves, and a forked devil tail. It stands at 3 to 6 feet tall, has glowing red eyes, and lets out a blood-curdling squeal. It's said to go around New Jersey killing livestock and haunting locals, while also conveniently being bulletproof, so any attempts to hunt the New Jersey Devil have ultimately failed. Interestingly, New Jersey's hockey team are called the New Jersey Devils, probably a nod to the cryptid. And also in the game Fallout 76, I believe you can hunt the mutant. I have some memory of being able to hunt down and kill the New Jersey Devil in Fallout 76. Over the years, there's been some photos and videos that are said to have been the New Jersey captured on camera, but a lot of skeptics put these down to huge cranes or even just complete hoaxes. Subliminal messaging. The theory was popularized from the 1957 scandal where movie theaters supposedly flashed a single frame that said "eat popcorn" during movies. It was said that this boosted popcorn sales by up to 57% in certain theaters. It's also been stated that Coca-Cola used to do the same thing, sneaking a single frame in before movies saying "drink Coca-Cola." But the man that did these experiments, his name was James Vickery, and it was never proven that what he discovered or what he found out was actually true. People have said his studies are weak and the data is completely false. A more modern day example would be that Disney films supposedly use subliminal messaging. I don't know, to brainwash our children or whatever. But the most famous one is that the clouds in the Disney's The Lion King say sex. Like, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to convince children to do that? I don't know. But people put this down to pareidolia, I believe it's called, where when you already have something in your mind, a bit like the music, and because you're thinking that you see it, your brain sort of puts it together, when really it's just random shapes. Body in the bed. Body in the bed is the urban legend. One of these happened to a friend of a friend once again. Supposedly, the story goes, a couple will, normally it's in Las Vegas, go to Vegas, stay in a hotel, and they will constantly complain about the smell of their room. Something smells in there. They would complain, the maids would come in, they would clean the room, completely wipe everything down, but the next day the smell would still persist. They would say again, we're complaining, we don't like the smell of the room, it sounds like something's rotting in here. Again, the maids would come in, completely spray perfume and clean the room. And again, on the third day, they would still be complaining about the smell. And it wouldn't be until the couple would check out of the room that maids would fully get to investigate, and they would cut open the mattress. And in the mattress, out would spill maggots, as there's a rotting body that has been stuffed inside the mattress. Now, this legend is actually rooted in some truth. There is a story from 1988 in Manola, New York. A lady named Mary de Oliveira was hidden inside an oceanside motel mattress. Many guests stayed in the room and slept atop of her before she was discovered. There's also a 1996 case from Pasadena, California, where an unidentified woman was hidden inside a Travelodge mattress. And again, multiple guests would complain about the smell, and she wasn't found for days. As far as how these two isolated cases create a urban myth like this, where the story says that it happened to a friend of a friend, perhaps people read the story and want to tell it as if it happened to someone they know, and that's how it spreads. That could be it. But yeah, there's no sort of wide recognized cases of this happening all over the world or all over the US. It's just a couple of isolated cases. Lincoln-Kennedy connection. Now, there's a famous list of uncanny coincidences between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. Urban legend puts these connections together and say perhaps John F. Kennedy was a reincarnation of Abraham Lincoln. Now, if we go through these, historically, they were both elected into Congress in 46, Lincoln being 1846 and Kennedy being 1946. They were also both elected to president in the year 60, 1860 and 1960 for JFK. They were also both heavily associated with civil rights, obviously Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves, and John F. Kennedy standing up for black rights. They were also both assassinated, being shot in the head. Funnily enough, both on a Friday. They were both sat with their wives at the time and another couple, and the male counterpart of the other couple was also injured in both cases. Both were then succeeded by Southern Democrats named Johnson, who also both happened to be born in the same year. Lincoln succeeded by Andrew Johnson, who was born in 1808, and JFK succeeded by Lyndon B. Johnson, who was born in 1908. Also, both assassins were Southerners who had three-word names, John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, this is enough raw material here for some creepy comparisons. It's definitely some crazy coincidences there that are a bit creepy. But people go a step further and they use these comparisons, and then there's some that have been falsified and spread around like they're fact, but they really have no truth behind them. People start comparing their surnames and say, oh, Lincoln and Kennedy both have 7 letters in their surname. This is just so trivial. A lot of surnames do. Some people go further and say they were both killed in a theater. If you know anything about JFK, he definitely wasn't killed in a theater. Some people spin it and say, oh, Lee Harvey Oswald was sitting in a theater when he shot him. That's also not true. People say that as well as being born 100 years apart, they were also married 100 years apart, and both their assassins were born in, respectively, 1839 and 1939. This isn't true. They were born 100 years apart, they were not married 100 years apart, and their assassins were not born in 39 of the respected years. These are some strange coincidences that are true, but a mathematician named Martin Gardner in the 60s pointed out that this is known as selective attention. You highlight the overlaps and ignore any differences. It's like massaging the good stuff together, all the goodness, and just not including anything that doesn't fit the narrative. Skunk Apes. Skunk Apes is Florida's answer to Bigfoot. It's often described as a bipedal ape-like man with covered in fur, and it gets its name because it smells like some rotting kind of meat. Skunk apes are described as the Pacific Bigfoot, being a little bit smaller than Bigfoot with broad shoulders, long arms, a cone-shaped head, and sometimes walking on its fists like a gorilla, I suppose. Folklore dates skunk apes back to 1818, where campers in the Everglades would report a man-sized monkey raiding their camp for food. There was a huge wave of sightings in the 1960s and 70s, and this is when Dave Shelley opened up the Skunk Ape Research Headquarters, which sets out to discover what the skunk apes actually are. This research headquarters still exists today. It's never been proven, and this is about the best evidence we have. Skeptics say perhaps it's an escaped ape. I think people can probably have apes as pets in Florida, so it could be an escaped pet. Or some people say it could just be a black bear standing on its back legs. Jeff the Killer. Jeff the Killer is a more modern myth or legend that comes from an infamous creepypasta. He's supposedly a disfigured serial killer with pale white skin, lidless eyes, and a permanently carved Chelsea smile. In stories, he whispers, "Go to sleep," before murdering anyone who won't shut their eyes. The original story goes, our character 13-year-old Jeff Woods moves to a new town and he's bullied by a trio of 3 bullies called Randy, Troy, and Keith for some reason. The bullies ambush Jeff at a party and douse him in bleach and vodka and set him alight. Jeff then snaps and, I think fairly so, murders them in, I would argue, a matter of self-defense. He recovers in hospital and has burn marks all over his body and pale skin, and he vouches to never smile again, prompting him to carve a permanent smile, so he gives himself his very own Chelsea smile. He burns off his eyelids so people can always see his face, and then he kills his entire family before vanishing, vouching to murder once again. In various different creepypastas, Jeff shows up murdering again. There's multiple stories out there. The original creepypasta came out in 2011, I believe, and since then there's been loads of copycat artwork, stories, and even video games created of our character, Jeff the Killer. This blew up in that online world so much that in the creepypasta wiki, the meme "Go to Sleep" was actually banned because it was just being completely overused. Now, the story actually very sadly inspired a real-life killer in 2014. Nicholas Fomich went on a murder spree, and supposedly he whispered to his victims, "Go to sleep," being inspired by the Killer Jeff story. And he actually did commit real-life murders. Black dogs. Black dogs is kind of a cryptid. It doesn't actually refer to real-life black dogs. It comes from mainly England, also some other places in Europe, where people say they see a massive, shaggy beast with glowing red or yellow eyes. They're said to be hellhounds sent from hell to protect certain areas, often being seen around graveyards. The story goes, if you ever see one, then you are doomed. Within the year, you will pass away. Sightings go back all the way to 1577, where a vicar was walking the grounds of his church where he was supposedly attacked and killed by one of these black dogs. He was supposedly killed with one swipe, and the dog was spawned from a lightning strike to the ground. Stories also date back to pre-Christian roots, with the Norse gods believing that Garma was the protector of hell, who was obviously a dog-like figure. And in Greek mythology, Cerberus is a black dog-like figure that symbolizes death and mystery. In medieval England, people used to go on hunts to try and hunt these dogs and find them if there had ever been reports in the towns. But in the modern day, I think this one's kind of died out a little bit. I've never really heard of it before, and it's not like you hear or see people trying to snap photos of demonic black dogs. Avril Lavigne replaced. Avril Lavigne being replaced refers to the internet conspiracy theory that in 2003, after success of her first album, Avril Lavigne committed and was replaced by a body double. The body double is known as Melissa Vandella, and she was said to be hired by the label to cash in on the pop punk star's success. The rumor started in 2011 on a Brazilian blog site called Avril Está Morta, which means Avril is dead. The post was completely satirical, and they compared pictures of the old Avril Lavigne with a new Avril Lavigne, saying that she has been replaced by a body double. And yeah, as I said, the post was completely satirical, but people missed the point, and the rumor spread as if it was real. In 2017, it sort of became viral again. People were sharing side-by-side photos again of the old and the new Avril Lavigne, and it became sort of an internet meme. I think this is one where people didn't really believe that it was real, but it's just really funny to say that Avril Lavigne was replaced. I don't know why Avril Lavigne specifically, but for whatever reason, it's funny. In 2024, Avril went on the Call Her Daddy podcast and says, "It's just a dumb internet rumor. I was flabbergasted people actually believed it." I've actually been lucky enough to see Avril Lavigne live at a festival a couple years ago, but who knows? Was it Avril or was it Melissa Vandella? SCPs. SCPs stands for Secure, Contain, and Protect. And the entries from the so-called SCP Foundation, which was a massively online collaborative internet horror forum, I guess. Writers would create their own containment files and upload them to the site. There are currently over 8,000 entries on the site, and they all contain sort of like objects, creatures, places, or concepts that defy reality. It started on 4chan in 2007, and the ultimate goal of it was to mock leaked classified documents from the government. The first example is called a Weeping Angel statue. I don't know if you've seen Doctor Who, and I'm not quite sure what came first, the Doctor Who Weeping Angel or the 4chan SCP Weeping Angel, but it's essentially a statue that when left unobserved, it will snap your neck and kill you. There were so many entries on the site, as I said, over 8,000. Some of them, there was one like an endless descending staircase, an indestructible adaptive reptile that can even survive nuclear bombs and acid attacks. And these sort of objects and stories are listed as if they're government documents, with details on what the object is, how it acts, and the tests that they put out on the object or thing, whatever it is. Now, these documents have got outside of 4chan and into the real world, and some people have believed that these are real-life leaked government documents. But realistically, it's a horror community taking the piss out of the Freedom of Information Act and some of the things that the government have released. Fast food / McDonald's urban legends. Over the years, there has been many myths and legends surrounding McDonald's. Things like using ground up earthworms to stuff in their burger as cheap meat. In Australia, there was rumors that they used kangaroo meat in their burgers as it was so much cheaper, and even putting organs and cow eyeballs blended up to make the burger mix. Over the years, McDonald's have had many rumors about them. I actually remember as well from when I was a kid, there was rumors that KFC used pigeon wings to serve their chicken wings. And that's obviously ridiculous. A pigeon wing would be tiny compared to a chicken wing, right? There's also been even more extreme stories like toddlers finding human fingers inside their Happy Meals. But there's no real truth behind any of this. McDonald's certainly aren't grinding up earthworms and putting them in burgers. I'm not saying they're serving the best meat, but I can almost guarantee it's not eyeballs and earthworms. Goatman. Goatman is a half-man, half-goat, axe-wielding cryptid that is said to haunt Maryland's Prince George's County woods. Sightings started in the 1950s after a string of decapitated dog reports. It was said to be 7 foot tall, have furry legs and horns, but a human torso. The origins of Goatman tell a tale of a recluse that was trying to protect his land when he was lynched by the KKK, and he returned as this Goatman figure just simply to protect his land. There was a spike of sightings in the 1970s, and most people link this to the Satanic Panic era that we had earlier. People already had all the Satan stuff on their mind that they created this figure. If they were alone in the woods and they heard a branch snap, your mind could play tricks on you, and the Satanic Panic bias perhaps inflected a devil-like image that some of these people claim to see. There was many real-life police logs from sightings, but never any actual evidence. Skeleton in the Tree. Skeleton in the Tree refers to a Victorian-era legend where trees would be knocked down by lightning or storms, revealing a skeleton trapped inside. The stories often state that the skeleton belonged to a fugitive from many years ago who climbed the tree to evade capture, climbed inside, couldn't get out, and starved to death, and had been there ever since. There are many stories of cases like this in Wales, and one of them from 1913, where a lightning strike knocked down a 900-year-old oak tree, exposing a rusty sword clutching corpse. There are many other cases similar to this from Wales, so perhaps it was literally something that criminals used to do back in the day. They used to climb trees and get stuck, somehow going inside the trunk of the tree. But strange one this. I don't really know if these are real, and they're so long ago, they're Victorian. And if they are real, if they're not real, what's the moral of the story here? Don't climb a tree, you might get stuck? Perhaps. Simpsons predictions. The Simpsons has been running since 1989, and it still runs today. And since that time, people have said that The Simpsons can predict the future. I'm sure you've seen some of these. They've been memed online a lot over the last 5 or 10 years. They had an episode where Trump ran for president, a 1995 episode in which they supposedly predicted smartwatches. Supposedly they predicted the 2014 FIFA scandal, where FIFA officials were accepting bribes. In the episode, Homer accepts bribes from footballing officials, and supposedly predicting the suit that Kamala Harris would wear, as Lisa wears the same suit as her when she's like running for vice president or something like that. I think these are just super obviously coincidences. They're not really predicting the future, but it's fun. It's a really fun meme. They make so many episodes, there's so many jokes in each episode that they're gonna get some coincidental hits. But yeah, I do really like this meme. The Simpsons can predict the future. It would be pretty cool if Matt Groening was a time traveler. Ed, and Eddie Purgatory. Ed, and Eddie Purgatory claims that the 3 kids from the cartoon show Ed, and Eddie are stuck in a childlike purgatory where they have to repeat scams and quests as penance for their sins. It was popularized on Reddit and 4chan in around 2013. There's even crazy stories that assign each character a certain death timeline and death story. And they say that this is why there's no adults in the show, because it's a pure childhood purgatory. Creator of the show Danny Antonucci says this is pure fanfic nonsense, shows 90s suburbia with cartoon logic. I've never really watched Ed, and Eddie, so I don't really know what this is referring to, but apparently most of the time they're stuck in the cul-de-sac and there's no adults in the world. Point to this theory, but people list outlying episodes where there are adults, there are adult things, and there are also episodes where they leave the cul-de-sac. So yeah. Fun fan fiction theory, but really the creators aren't trying to create some childhood purgatory. Bottomless pits. Bottomless pits are legendary voids or sinkholes that are literally what they say on the tin, a hole in the ground that is completely bottomless and sometimes even perhaps a void into hell. The stories of bottomless pits obviously date back to biblical times, where there's a story of Satan's 1,000-year chain pits, where in end times locusts will emerge from these bottomless pits. Also during Victorian times, when sinkholes would happen, which we now understand to be a geographical natural phenomenon, the Victorians would think that this is indeed some kind of curse from God, and they are absolute bottomless pits into hell. In more modern examples, we see bottomless pits in gaming all the time. The classic 2D platformer games like Sonic and Mario, if you fall off the edge, they fall into a bottomless pit and they die and make that iconic sounds from Sonic and Mario that we know. Gliders. Now, I do believe gliders is referring to a kind of cryptid-like feature born again from the internet era of creepypastas. I guess they're described as ghost-like figures which simply float down hallways and haunt people. A lot of people compare them to like a sleep paralysis connection. I don't know if anyone's ever had sleep paralysis, but it always is like there's someone there standing in the corner of the room. For me, they're not floating, they're not legless. It's like just a weird looking thing. But they look like a sewer person for me. But a lot of people say that they experience these glider-like cryptids while experiencing sleep paralysis. Obviously, in a lot of horror movies, this is how ghosts are depicted. For many years now, ghosts have been depicted as gliding along, even with legs or without legs. They sort of just float along in their vapor-like form. Black cats. All around the world, people have seen black cats as being superstitious, but different cultures have different meanings for the superstition behind them, some being good and some being bad. The Egyptians saw black cats as being super sacred. They would actually mummify any black cats that pass away, and if someone was to kill a black cat, the punishment in ancient Egypt would have been the death penalty. In Japanese culture, they say black cats bring extreme wealth, while in Irish culture, they say black cats were a curse if they were ever on your farms, and they could ruin a whole year's worth of crops. In 13th century Europe, Pope Gregory IV linked black cats to devil worship. And of course, that kind of still lives on today. If you think of a black cat in European culture, probably in American culture too, we might symbolize a black cat being the pet of a witch. Now, in medieval England, very interestingly, there was a black cat genocide, as people saw them as demonic and the witch's pet. And this is around the sort of same time where the plague was absolutely rife across London and the rest of Europe. Rat populations would explode and be able to spread the plague, as there was no rats to deal with these pests. Now, my girlfriend is very superstitious, and if we're ever walking down the street and she sees a black cat, she turns away. She can't walk towards it. Apparently, it's extremely bad luck if a black cat walks across your path, and she will not allow that to happen. So, the myths of black cats still lives on today. Michigan Dogman. Michigan Dogman is a 7-foot bipedal dog-like humanoid with a dog's head and a man's torso. Once again, it is said to have piercing glowing eyes, but this time they're said to be blue. The first sightings come from 1887 in Wexford, Michigan, where some lumberjacks working in the woods claim they saw the Michigan Dogman. Ancient tribal lore from the region says stories of a dog-like shape-shifting man that appears every 10 years on the 7th year. So the next year it will appear will be 2027. Interestingly, these stories come from the same region as the 1887 sightings, but the ancient story says that you can repel the Michigan Dogman with loud claps. Unfortunately, there's no evidence out there, and again, skeptics would say it could be a bear on its back legs or perhaps just a giant dog or giant wolf. Amityville House. 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York became a horror legend when Ronaldo DeFeo Jr. murdered his parents and 4 siblings with a rifle. On November the 13th, 1974, while his whole family slept, he went and murdered them one by one with a rifle, claiming that voices in the house told him to do it. A year later, the Lutz family bought the house for a bargain of $80,000, and they fled after 28 days, citing green slime pouring from the walls. They claimed at 3:15 a.m. they would constantly be waking up almost every night. Interestingly, this is the time when the murders originally happened. A year later, in 1976, the Warren family bought the property, where they created this photo of a demonic-looking boy. It was exposed later that the photo was a complete hoax, so clearly people were now buying this house as they were into, I guess the true crime that happened a couple of years before. Books and films about the house together have grossed over $500 million US. And the Lutez owners of the house tried to actually sue for some compensation, but they have been completely unsuccessful. The property's address was changed to 108 Ocean View Avenue to deter onlookers, I suppose. But since 2017, the house has been flipped 5 times, most recently selling for $605,000 US. Endless elevators. Imagine stepping inside an elevator, clicking to go to a certain floor, the doors open and there's just a concrete wall. And then you try another floor and you are greeted by exactly the same thing. Well, this is the story of an endless elevator. It's basically an elevator that is what it says on the tin, endless. Every single floor either has a complete concrete wall behind it and you can never leave the elevator, or there are sub-basements into the abyss, and once again, perhaps even platforms that take you all the way down into hell. The myth became really popular in the 1980s for some reason. In Korea, they have an elevator ritual game where they press all the floors on an elevator and visit every floor looking for that concrete blank wall and looking to try and get stuck in a endless elevator. It's often seen as like a glitch in the matrix. If you believe in the simulation theory, some elevators can glitch and leave victims trapped for eternity. I don't know if you've seen that Netflix documentary about the Cecil Hotel that tells the story of Eliza Jam. And she stayed in the hotel and there was a video footage of her in the elevators and then she was never seen again. That kind of re-sparked the theory of endless elevators. But obviously, if you've watched the Netflix documentary, it's super anticlimactic and her body was found on the roof inside the water tank. The Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect, I think, is kind of like an explanation that can be used to describe a lot of these myths and theories. I think I used the Mandela Effect to describe one earlier. Now, it's called the Mandela Effect because the classic example is people seem to think that Nelson Mandela died in prison in 1980. Well, that's not in fact true. He actually died in 2013 and went on to become a ruler and huge political figure in South Africa. Another classic that actually always gets me is that in Star Wars, Darth Vader never says, "Luke, I am your father." He in fact says, "No, I am your father." A lady called Fiona Broom coined the term in 2009 after she realized that there seemed to be many people that believed that Mandela died in prison in the 80s. Many people remember a funeral and riots in the streets at the time, but of course, this isn't true. She theorized that perhaps there was some timeline merge or a glitch, again, if you believe in the simulation theory. Some other examples that I quite enjoy are the Fruit of the Loom logo containing a cornucopia or not, Looney Tunes being a Looney Tunes instead, and the Monopoly Man having a monocle. He doesn't have a monocle, supposedly. Science puts this down to a theory called confabulation, which simply means your brain is filling in gaps and making things up. And also with the suggestibility all over social media, when someone suggests something like the Monopoly man had a monocle, some people just seem to go along with it and think, yeah, he did have a monocle, right? That's confabulation. Your brain is just filling that gap when he has indeed never had a monocle. However, some people do believe the multiverse is collapsing and perhaps we have merged with another timeline. Lindsay Lohan actually has a twin. The Lindsay Lohan twin might be another good example of the Mandela effect at play. Millions of people seem to swear by the fact that Lindsay Lohan had a twin named Ali or Alana. People claim during the Disney Channel show Parent Trap, Lindsay Lohan's twin was a stand-in for her, and there was constantly two kind of characters that were identical, yet you could tell them apart. Rumors were fueled even more in the 90s when at an award show, Disney CEO at the time, Michael Eisner, asked a 12-year-old Lindsay Lohan, "Where's your twin tonight?" Now, there is no evidence that Lindsay Lohan has a twin, but she does have a sister called Ali Lohan, but she is 7 years younger than Lindsay. Whether it's Mandela effect at play or again just a kind of fun meme like the Avril Lavigne body double switch out, I think the latter. I think this is just a fun meme that kind of maybe some people thought it was true and it's taken the internet by storm, and it's kind of funny to play on the fact that she has a secret twin. Aren't you glad you didn't turn the lights on? Aren't you glad you didn't turn the lights on refers to the classic urban legend or campfire tale that tells a story of a girl who returns home at night to hear noises in the other room. She has a roommate, so she doesn't think anything of it, but she avoids turning the lights on just in case they're trying to sleep. She undresses in the pitch black and then climbs into bed to go to sleep. It's not till the next morning she wakes up and finds her roommate butchered with a blood-stained message on her mirror reading, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn the lights on?" The phrase painted in blood on the mirror implies that the killer was watching her the whole time. Now, unfortunately, I was never invited to girls' sleepovers, but apparently this was a common story that girls would tell at sleepovers and slumber parties, dating all the way back to the 70s. It plays on the primal anxiety and fear. What if someone is watching me while I'm at my most vulnerable? The story lives on and has been featured in some various creepypastas online in modern day internet culture. Thanks for making it through part 1 of the Urban Myths and Legends Iceberg. Make sure you subscribe, as I'm going to be releasing these for the next few weeks, and we're going deep down into this iceberg with some really obscure urban myths and legends that you've probably never heard of.